The hum was the first thing you learned and the last thing you forgot. It was the song of the Kerberos, a low, steady vibration that traveled from the asteroid's iron heart through the kilometers of rock and steel and into the soles of your feet. It was the sound of life support, of the fusion core burning deep in the vessel's gut, of the spin gravity centrifuges keeping everyone from floating away. For Kale, born and raised in the deep black of the Kuiper Belt, it wasn't just a sound, it was the baseline of existence, the silence against which all other noises were measured. He was a rock jockey, a pilot, and his world was a 10-by-10 cockpit at the front of a mining skiff named the Magpie. From his perch, he could see the Kerberos in its entirety, a colossal, pock-marked potato of an asteroid, bristling with communication arrays, docking arms, and the running lights of its habitation sectors. It wasn't pretty, but it was home to 10,000 souls who'd chosen the Belt's brutal freedom over the gilded cages of Earth and Mars. His mentor, Reese, always said they didn't live on the Kerberos. They were part of its bloodstream, each person a corpuscle with a job to do. Reese's job, for 40 years, had been teaching pups like Kyle the song of the rock, the intuitive, almost mystical sense of where to drill, where to blast, and when to run. He was out there with Kyle now, his grizzled face a miniature hologram projected on the Magpie's dash, his voice a familiar, gravelly comfort over the comms. "Easy, Kyle, easy," Reese murmured, watching the skiff's manipulator arms gently probe a fissure in a free-floating chunk of ice-laced nickel iron. "Don't force it." You feel that tremor through the frame. She's telling you she's got a weak belly. Listen to her. Kale let his hands hover over the control, closing his eyes for a second, trying to feel what Reese felt. He focused on the hum, the ship's constant song, and tried to hear the discordant note from the rock outside, the subtle vibration of stress and potential fracture. It was a belter trick, something the interplanet engineers with their fancy geological scanners could never replicate. It was art. He felt it then, a faint shudder up the port side arm, a whisper of protest from the asteroid. "Got it," Kael breathed, maneuvering the drill head into place. The drill bit home with a satisfying crunch, and the skiff's small hold began to fill with precious, profitable ore. Reese's hologram chuckled, a sound like rocks tumbling. "There you go. Kid, you're starting to hear the music. One day, you'll be better at this than I ever was." A notification pinged on Kael's console, a reminder from the colony's central scheduler. It was a picture of two small, gap-toothed children, Reese's grandkids, with the caption, "Time for Grandpa, don't be late." Reese saw it, and his gruff expression softened into something rare and unguarded. "That's my cue. Anya will have my hide if I'm late to put them to bed." Anya was Reese's daughter, the ship's lead engineer, a woman who saw the Kerberos not as a living thing, but as a complex machine to be maintained with logic and precision. She and her father loved each other fiercely, but they spoke different languages. "Go on," Kyle said, smiling. "Tell Lena and Sam I'll race them on the Sims tomorrow." "Will do," Reese said in his hologram, already starting to fade. "Bring the Magpie home clean, KL, and remember to listen." His image vanished, leaving only the steady hum of the skiff and the vast, star-dusted emptiness outside the canopy. It was an hour later, as Kyle was guiding the lumbering Magpie back toward the Kerberos's cavernous hangar bay, that the world went wrong. The first sign was a flicker in the hum. It was almost imperceptible, a momentary skip in the ship's heartbeat, like a singer catching their breath. Kyle felt it in his teeth. He checked his boards, all green. The Kerberos comms channel, usually a lively chatter of pilots, dock workers, and traffic controllers, was suddenly unnervingly quiet. Then, a red alert klaxon blared through his cockpit, a frantic, shrieking pulse that meant only one thing: a sector-wide containment breach. He slammed the comms panel. Kerberos Control. This is Magpie. What's the sit rep? What sector static? Answered him. Not the usual hiss of empty space, but a thick, oily static that felt wrong. Engineered. He tried again, his throat tightening. Anya Silas. Can anyone read me? More static. He could see the Kerberos growing in his viewport, but one section, Sector Gamma, was dark. The running lights were out. Gamma Sector, the family Habs, the schools, the nursery, where Reese was. A new sound broke through the static, a garbled, desperate burst of audio. It was Reese's voice, distorted and laced with panic. Cold light. Kyle. They don't make a sound, they're sealing it crystal. It's not. The transmission cut out, replaced by the same thick silence as before. Kyle's blood ran cold, sealing it. He pushed the Magpie's engines to their limit, ignoring the structural stress warnings that screamed across his console. He had to see. As he swung the skiff around toward Gamma Sector, he saw it. A section of the hull, an area dozens of meters wide around the main viewport of the nursery, was shimmering. It was covered in a crystalline growth, a semi-translucent, milky substance that seemed to be growing even as he watched, spreading like frost across a window pane, smothering viewports and sealing exterior hatches. It pulsed with a faint, internal luminescence, a cold, sterile light that absorbed the stars around it. Panic gave way to a white, hot surge of adrenaline. Breaking protocol, ignoring the automated warnings blaring from the dormant docking bay, Kyle fired the Magpie's maneuvering thrusters and brought the skiff in close, its floodlights cutting through the dark. The crystal was alien, unnatural. Its surface was a tapestry of interlocking geometric patterns that shifted and reformed, defying any known laws of crystal formation. He could see the scorch marks where the ship's internal defense turrets had fired, the molten slag of the hull around the edges. But the crystal itself was untouched, pristine. It was absorbing the energy, feeding on it. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that whatever had done this was still in there, or had been. As his floodlights swept across the crystalline shell, something detached from the hull just beyond the light's edge. It was a vessel, though the word felt inadequate. It was a sliver of polished obsidian, a shard of frozen night that moved without any visible means of propulsion. It didn't fire thrusters or bend space-time. It simply ceased to be in one place and appeared in another, covering a kilometer in the blink of an eye. It was silent, graceful, and utterly terrifying. It paused for a fraction of a second, as if observing him, and then it was gone, vanishing into the blackness of the belt without a ripple, leaving Kale alone with the silent, glittering tomb that had once been Gamma Sector. Inside the Kerberos, chaos was a tidal wave. People were shouting in the corridors, demanding answers the command crew didn't have. Silas, the ship's security chief and a man who looked like he'd been carved from an asteroid himself, had his teams at the Gamma Sector bulkheads, their plasma cutters throwing sparks that did nothing against the strange crystal that had grown from the inside, sealing them out as effectively as it had sealed the exterior. Every tool they had, every weapon, was useless. The crystal seemed to deaden the energy, its cold surface refusing to melt, cut, or crack. Anya was there, her face a pale, emotionless mask that barely concealed the frantic terror in her eyes. She ran spectral analysis scans, her voice tight and clipped as she called out readings that made no sense. The molecular structure is impossible, she stated, not to anyone in particular. It's a zero-entropy lattice. It shouldn't exist. It's like a perfect, flawless diamond the size of a hab block. Kyle, having docked the Magpie and sprinted through the panicked corridors, found them there. I saw a ship, he gasped, shoving his way through the crowd to Anya and Silas. It just left, detached from the hull and vanished. Silas turned, his eyes narrowing. Describe it. Kyle did, his words tumbling over each other as he described the silent, crystalline vessel. The security chief's face grew grimmer with every word. He'd fought in corporate skirmishes, pirate actions, and belt uprisings, but this was something else entirely. This was unknown. It was Anya who found the solution, her mind, lost in the problem of the crystal's impossible structure, suddenly saw an answer. The song of the rock, she whispered, looking at Kale. Dad always said every material has a resonant frequency, a note that will shake it apart from the inside. Ignoring Silas's skeptical glare, she ran back to her engineering lab. She returned minutes later, wheeling a heavy-duty mining resonator, a device normally used to create seismic waves to map the interiors of asteroids. If this stuff has a structure, it has a frequency, she said, her voice gaining strength. Her grief momentarily burned away by the pure fire of scientific focus. We just have to find the right note. She placed the resonator against the crystalline wall and began tuning the frequency, sending focused sonic pulses into the material. For a long time, nothing happened. The crowd watched, their hope fading. But Kyle, remembering Reese's words, knelt and pressed his helmet to the deck plates, listening. He felt the hum of the ship, and now, a new hum from the resonator. He closed his eyes, searching for the discordance, for the note that felt wrong. Higher, Anya, he said, his voice quiet. Go higher. It's a high, thin sound. Anya adjusted the frequency, twisting the dial into the upper ranges. The resonator's whine grew shrill, and then a low groan echoed from the crystal wall. A hairline fracture appeared, then another, spreading like a spider web, with a sound like 1,000 wine glasses shattering at once. A section of the crystal wall disintegrated, crumbling into a fine, glittering dust. Silas and his team, clad in full vacuum suits, were the first through the breach, weapons raised. Kyle, grabbing a plasma cutter from a nearby toolkit, was right behind them. The air inside Gamma Sector was cold, still, and utterly silent. The emergency lights cast long, distorted shadows down the empty corridors. There were no signs of a struggle, no bodies, no blood. It was just empty. They moved through the common areas, the classrooms, the living quarters, their boots echoing in the unnerving quiet. Everything was in its place, a half-finished meal on a table, a child's drawing lying on the floor, a game left paused on a screen. It was as if everyone inside had simply evaporated. They reached the nursery's main observation deck, the large viewport now completely opaque with the alien crystal. And there, in the center of the room, they stopped. The place was empty. Every crib, every playpen was vacant. All of them, the 87 children who called this sector home, and the 23 staff and family members, including Reese, who had been with them, were gone. The only things left behind were the cold, the silence, and, lying on the floor in the exact center of the room, a single, shed shard of the shimmering crystal, pulsing with a faint, cold light, like the heart of a fallen star, a collective, Horrified gasp went through the team as the realization settled over them. They hadn't been attacked. They had been plundered. Their children had been harvested. The silence that followed was a living thing, a predator that stalked the cold corridors of Gamma Sector and devoured sound. The discovery in the nursery broke something in the people of the Kerberos. The initial shockwave of the breach had been one of fear. This was something far deeper, a hollowing out of their collective soul. The news didn't spread through official channels. It bled through the bulkheads, carried on the faces of Silas's grim security team as they returned from the voided sector. It was in the way Anya walked back to her engineering lab, her movements stiff and robotic, her eyes fixed on a point in the middle distance that no one else could see. It was in the tremor in Kael's hands that he couldn't stop, a phantom vibration from a world that no longer had a baseline. Grief was a contagion. It started in the families who had lost everything and spread outwards, until the entire 10,000-person colony was infected. The bustling mess halls fell quiet, the raucous laughter of off-shift miners replaced by hushed whispers. The hum of the Kerberos itself seemed to change, its steady, life-giving thrum now feeling like a mournful dirge. The first 24 hours, there was only despair. But Belters were not a people given to despair. They were the descendants of outcasts, pioneers, and survivors. They lived on a rock surrounded by lethal vacuum, their lives a constant negotiation with a universe that wanted them dead. Despair was a luxury they couldn't afford. On the second day, the grief began to curdle into something else: rage. It started in hushed tones in the maintenance shafts and welding bays, and soon it was a roar that echoed through the ship's central forum. An emergency council was called, with Silas, Anya, and Kael standing on the command dais. The unlikely triumvirate of a tragedy. Silas, representing order, tried to maintain control, his voice a low rumble that barely contained his own fury. "We have sent a priority message to the inner system, to FleetCom. Help is coming." A voice from the crowd, a haggard-looking miner named Jax, spat on the floor. "Help FleetCom is 2 years away, at best burn." Silas, "What will be left of us by then? What will be left of our kids?" The word kids hung in the air, a shard of glass in the heart of everyone present. Anya stepped forward, her face pale but her voice steady, amplified by the forum speakers. She held up a data slate, displaying a complex, rotating image of the alien crystal's molecular structure. "This is what they left behind," she said, her tone as cold and precise as the object she described. "The shard from the nursery. It's not just a material, it's a data storage device, a logbook. I've spent every second since we found it trying to break its encryption." She paused, and the entire forum held its breath. It's not written in language or code. It's harmonic. It records destinations not as coordinates, but as unique quantum frequencies, like a signature note for a specific point in space-time. She looked up, her eyes finding Kael's in the crowd. The ship Kael saw, the one that detached from the hull. Its departure is logged in this crystal, a single faint resonance trail leading out system, deep into the black. It's a trail we can follow. The implication of her words settled over the crowd, and the room erupted. The argument was immediate and violent. One faction, led by the ship's chief administrator, argued for caution, to run, to take the Kerberos, their only home, and flee in the opposite direction, to hide in the uncharted regions of the belt until help arrived. "We are a mining colony, not an army," the administrator shouted, his voice cracking. "Our skiffs are haulers, not warships. To chase these things is Suicide Jax, the miner, vaulted onto a cargo crate, his face flushed with anger. And what about our children? Are they a price you're willing to pay for caution? They came here, to our home, and they took the most precious thing we have. They didn't kill us because they don't see us as a threat. They see us as a resource. A farm. Are we going to wait for them to come back for the harvest? His words struck a chord, say. And a low growl of agreement rippled through the assembled miners and engineers. They were rough people, hard people. They knew how to fight. They fought the rock, the vacuum, the crushing loneliness of the deep black every single day. They didn't know how to run. All eyes turned to Kyle. He hadn't spoken, hadn't moved from his spot beside Anya. He was just a pilot, a kid. But he was the one who had heard Reese's last words. He was the one who had seen the silent, impossible ship. He was their witness. He walked to the center of the dais, his heart hammering against his ribs. He looked out at the faces, seeing the same mixture of loss and rage that was eating him alive from the inside. My mentor, Reese, he began, his voice surprisingly clear and strong. He taught me to listen. He said everything in the belt has a song, a vibration. The rock, the ship, everything. The last thing he said to me was that they were a cold light, that they didn't make a sound. He took a breath. The memory of Reese's panicked voice, a fresh wound. They don't have a song. They are the silence that comes after. They are the void. We can't run from that. You can't hide from an absence of light. You can only make your own. He looked at Jax, at Anya, at the hundreds of hardened faces staring back at him. We have ships. We have weapons. We have the hum of this rock in our bones and a fire in our hearts that they don't understand. They think we're just dust and noise. Let's show them how loud the noise can be. Let's show them that even in the deepest dark, we can make a light of our own. For Reese, for all of them. His final words were not a shout, but a promise, and they were met not with a roar, but with a profound, determined silence. The debate was over. The decision had been made. The Kerberos would not run. It would hunt. The hangar bay, once a place of routine maintenance and cargo loading, transformed into the arsenal of a revolution. It became a symphony of chaos, the steady hum of the ship now overlaid with the shriek of plasma cutters, the percussive clang of hammers on steel, and the furious shouts of engineers. There was no fleet comm protocol, no officer class. There was only the raw, collective will of a people pushed too far. Anya was the conductor of this orchestra of vengeance. Her grief, too vast and cold for tears, was channeled into a terrifying, brilliant focus. She became a creature of pure logic and engineering, her days a blur of complex calculations and radical retrofits. She took the resonance technology she'd used to shatter the crystal wall and weaponized it. Her teams began mounting heavy-duty mining resonators onto the hulls of the mining skiffs, tuning them to project focused, high-frequency sonic blasts capable of shattering crystalline structures. They wouldn't just be shooting plasma. They would be singing a song of destruction, a counter-frequency to the enemy's silent technology. Kyle's Magpie was the prototype. He worked alongside Anya, his pilot's intuition guiding her engineering. They stripped the skiff of its non-essential weight, the ore processing unit, the excess life support for long hauls, and reinforced the cockpit with salvaged hull plating. The manipulator arms, once used for delicate drilling, were refitted with industrial-grade plasma torches, jury-rigged into crude but powerful short-range cannons. Silas took charge of the human element. He turned miners into a militia. He ran them through zero-G combat drills in the empty cargo holds, teaching them to use their rivet guns and cutting lasers as weapons. Their flight suits were reinforced with scavenged plating. Their faces, once smudged with rock dust, were now grim with determination. They weren't soldiers, but they were belters, and they learned fast. They named their fleet the Orphans, a bitter, defiant moniker for those who had been left behind. In total, they managed to retrofit 67 skiffs, a motley collection of haulers, prospectors, and tugs that now bristled with makeshift weaponry. They were a junkyard armada, powered by grief and fusion. While the fleet was born in fire and steel, Anya continued her work on the alien shard. The Resonance Trail was their only lead, a whisper in the cosmic dark. It's not a straight line, she explained to Kale and Silas one cycle, pointing to a holographic star chart in her lab. The trail was a faint, wavering line that seemed to jump intermittently. They don't travel through normal space. It looks like they create temporary micro-wormholes, instantaneous jumps. The trail we're following isn't the path itself, but the residual resonance of those tears in space-time. It's faint, and it's fading. We have to go now. The destination was a trinary star system in the Oort cloud, a place Belter charts marked only with a skull and crossbones and the designation gravitationally unstable. It was a place no one went, a perfect place to hide. The day of the launch. A solemn quiet fell over the Kerberos. Those who were staying behind, the older, the essential technicians, the few families who had been spared the loss, lined the hangar bay's observation decks. There were no rousing speeches, no triumphant fanfare. There was only the grim exchange of nods, the tight embraces, and the silent prayers. Kyle climbed into the cockpit of the modified Magpie, its interior now a cramped cage of exposed wiring and supplementary targeting screens. The familiar controls felt different, heavier, charged with a new and terrible purpose. He strapped himself in, his hand steady now. The tremor of the first days burned away by resolve. Over the fleet-wide comms, there was only the sound of 67 pilots running their pre-flight checks. Then, Anya's voice, crisp and clear from the Kerberos command center, which would serve as their carrier and flagship. All orphan wings. Report readiness. One by one, the call signs came in. Dust Devil, ready. Stonefist, ready. Hard Nail, ready. Kale keyed his own comm. Magpie, ready. He looked out his viewport at the other skiffs. A swarm of ugly, angry hornets clinging to the hull of their nest. They weren't a fleet. They were a scar, ripped from the heart of a mining colony, about to be hurled into the void. Anya's voice came again, devoid of emotion, but carrying the weight of all their loss. The trail is live. All ships, launch on my mark. Let's go get our children back. The hangar bay doors groaned open, revealing the cold, indifferent beauty of the star-dusted black. A moment of silence. Then, Anya's final command. Mark. 67 engines ignited in a single C. Defiant roar, a cacophony of sound and fury that overpowered the ship's ancient hum. The Orphans launched, not as a graceful fleet, but as a jagged, angry fist, punching a hole in the darkness, following a ghost of a signal into the unknown. They were not explorers or soldiers. They were parents and siblings, friends and lovers. They were a choir of the bereaved, and they were going to teach the silence how to scream. The journey into the Oort cloud was a descent into madness. The Trinary star system was not a place of celestial harmony, but a violent, cosmic brawl. A bloated red giant, a sputtering white dwarf, and a hyperactive neutron star were locked in a gravitational death spiral. Their orbits chaotic and unpredictable. They flung streams of superheated plasma and lethal radiation across the system, turning the space between them into a shooting gallery of rogue planetoids and stellar debris. For the orphans, it was hell. For the Belter pilots, it was just another Tuesday, magnified 1,000 times. Their lives had been spent dancing on the edge of disaster, navigating asteroid fields where a single miscalculation meant instant, silent death. This was the same dance, just to a faster, more violent song. Kyle felt it in the bones of the Magpie. The ship groaned under the constant, shifting gravitational tides, its frame twisting as it was pulled in 3 directions at once. Alarms screamed and died as he and the other pilots flew not by computer, but by instinct, by the seat of their reinforced flight suits. They flew ugly, as the inner system pilots called it, a chaotic, reactive style that looked like panic, but was in fact a state of pure, sublime focus. They didn't fly in neat formations, but as a scattered, reactive swarm, using the system's own chaos as cover, ducking behind spinning chunks of ice to avoid a radiation burst from the white dwarf, or riding the gravitational wave of a passing moonlet to save fuel. Over the comms, the initial bravado of the launch had been sandblasted away, leaving only the raw nerves of the pilots. "Grav spike on my 6 jacks. You're flying right into it," one voice would snap. "Shields are buckling. I'm reading 1,200 rads," another would cry out. They lost 2 ships before they were even halfway to the coordinates. The Stone Fist was caught in a plasma flare from the Red Giant. Its hull flash-boiled into vapor. The Grit, a small prospecting skiff, misjudged the neutron star's gravity well and was simply pulled apart, its pieces crushed into a stream of glittering atoms. There were no screams, just a sudden silence on the comms where a voice used to be, a call sign that went unanswered. Each loss was a physical blow, a fresh tear in the fabric of their community. Kyle felt each one in his gut, another name to add to the litany of the lost. He flew with a cold, clear focus, his mind a quiet space where only the hum of his ship and the lessons of his mentor existed. "Listen to the rock," Reese had said. Here, the entire system was the rock, a single, massive, groaning thing on the verge of collapse. He listened. He felt the pull of the star, the shudder of a coming gravitic shear, and he moved the Magpie not against the chaos, but with it, becoming another piece of deadly, unpredictable debris in the cosmic storm. From the bridge of the Kerberos, which hung at the system's edge like a nervous spectator, Anya's voice was their only anchor. She filtered out the panic, her commands ruthlessly efficient. "Orphan 7, vent plasma from your port tanks. You need to shift your center of gravity. Jax, pull up. You're catching a tidal drag." "Kyle, the resonance trail is stabilizing. It's close. Dead ahead, inside that debris cluster." Kyle looked. Ahead was a disk of shattered rock and ice, the remains of a moon torn apart by the warring stars. It was a perfect place to hide. "All wings, tighten the swarm," Kyle ordered, his voice taking on an authority he didn't know he had. "Kill your running lights and vent engines in short bursts. Let's go in quiet. Let's show them we can be silent." 2. The 65 remaining ships of the Orphan Fleet slipped into the debris field, their makeshift warships disguised as chunks of rock and ice. They moved with a predator's patience. The anger that had fueled them now cooled into a single, sharp point of intent. The resonance trail grew stronger, a clear, high note in the system's noisy symphony. And then they saw it. It wasn't a base. It wasn't a station. It was a cancer. A colossal asteroid, 50 kilometers in diameter, had been hollowed out and infested. Crystalline structures grew from it like malignant polyps, glowing with the same cold, internal light Kale had seen on the hull of the Kerberos. These structures weren't built. They were grown, vast, geometric spires and lattices that pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm, drinking in the ambient radiation from the 3 stars. There were no docking bays, no antennae, no viewports. It was a sealed, self-contained thing, utterly alien and profoundly wrong. Dozens of the silent, obsidian ships were docked to its surface, not with clamps or tethers, but fused directly to the crystal, as if they were buds on a branch, waiting to break off. A low hum vibrated through Kale's hull, but it wasn't a sound his ship was making. It was the place itself, the entire crystalline asteroid, resonating at a frequency that made his teeth ache. It was a song of perfect, cold order in a system of absolute chaos. This was their nest. "Anya, are you seeing this?" Kale whispered into the comm. "I see it." Her voice came back, tight with a mixture of awe and revulsion. "The entire structure is a single crystal. The energy readings are impossible. It's a colossal resonator, using the 3 stars as a power source." Before they could formulate a plan, the trap was sprung. The silence was not broken by an alarm or a weapon firing, but by a change in the light. The crystalline spires on the asteroid pulsed in unison, a single, blinding flash. And in that instant, the space around the orphan fleet was no longer empty. A dozen of the obsidian shard ships were there, having jumped from the asteroid surface, appearing among the fleet without a sound. It was a perfect, calculated ambush. The battle began. The shard ships didn't fire plasma or missiles. They weaponized the crystal. Beams of coherent light, far hotter and more focused than any laser, lanced out, slicing through the makeshift armor of the skiffs. One beam caught the Dust Devil mid-maneuver, and the ship simply split in 2, its halves tumbling away into the dark. The aliens moved with a chilling, geometric precision, their attacks coordinated without any detectable communication. They were a single, distributed consciousness. The orphans fought back with everything they had. A storm of uncontrolled fury. Plasma torches flared, mining charges detonated against obsidian hulls, and the newly mounted resonators sang their destructive song. Jax, his voice a raw scream of hate, rammed his skiff, the hard nail directly at one of the shard ships, his resonators shrieking at maximum frequency. The alien ship's hull flickered, its crystalline structure momentarily destabilized by the sonic assault, and Jax's plasma cutters tore a deep gash in its side before 2 more shard ships converged and vaporized him in a crossfire of light. They were outmatched. The orphans were a bar brawler swinging wild punches. The aliens were a master swordsman, each move precise, economical, and lethal. They were losing badly. In the cockpit of the Magpie, Kale dodged and weaved, the lessons of the treacherous journey now the only thing keeping him alive. He fired his plasma cutters, scoring a glancing blow on a shard ship, the molten slag of his own weapon cooling and freezing on its perfect, black surface. But as he fought, he was also listening. He felt the hum of the alien nest, the thrum of their ships, and he sensed a connection. "Anya," he grunted, wrenching the Magpie into a spin to avoid a cutting beam. "They're networked. The ships aren't just docked to that thing. They're part of it. The spires on the asteroid, they're command nodes. They're controlling the ships." "I see it." Kyle. Anya's voice was frantic, data scrolling across her screen. "The flashes of light aren't random. It's a targeting system. The entire asteroid is the fire control for the fleet." A shard ship appeared directly in front of him, its featureless prow filling his viewport. There was no time to dodge. Kyle reacted on pure instinct. He didn't fire his weapons. He fired his resonator. He didn't try to match the frequency of the ship's hull. Instead, he did what Anya had taught him, what he had done at the bulkhead of Gamma Sector. He swept the frequencies, searching for the right note. For a half second that stretched into an eternity, nothing happened. The alien ship's cutting beam began to form at its tip. Then, Kael felt it. A sour, discordant note, a flaw in the alien's perfect song. He locked the resonator onto that frequency. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The obsidian hull of the shard ship did not shatter. It lost cohesion. The crystalline structure dissolved, the perfect geometric lattice breaking down. The ship turned from a solid object into a cloud of black, glittering dust, its energy core imploding in a silent, contained flash. A stunned silence fell over the comms, broken only by a single, choked gasp from one of the pilots. "What? What did you do?" Silas's voice demanded. "I found a flaw in their song," Kael breathed, his body trembling with adrenaline. He looked at the alien nest, at the pulsating spires. They're not just command nodes, they're amplifiers. They're broadcasting the frequency that holds their ships together, but it has to be perfect. If you hit them with the wrong note, a new, desperate hope surged through the fleet. "Anya," Kael yelled, "can you isolate the frequency I used? Can you broadcast it to the whole fleet?" "Isolating. Now," she replied, her voice filled with a new, fierce energy. "Stand by. Orphans. We're about to change our tune." The battle was far from over. 10 more skiffs had been reduced to wreckage, floating like tombs in the debris field. But now, for the first time since their children had been taken, they had more than just rage. They had a weapon. They had a chink in the armor of the silent, crystalline gods who had plundered their home. As Anya worked to weaponize his discovery, Kael looked out at the 50-odd ships that remained of his fleet, a battered, bleeding pack of wolves. They had followed him into hell. Now, he had to lead them through the fire. Uploading the counter-frequency. All orphan wings. Slave your resonators to my signal. On my mark. We sing them a song they won't forget. Anya's voice, stripped of all but a cold, burning purpose, echoed in the cockpits of the 53 remaining skiffs. The war-torn debris field, lit by the chaotic strobing of the trinary stars and the silent explosions of the battle, became a tuning fork. For a moment, the fleet held its position, a wounded animal gathering its strength, their resonators humming as they synced to the frequency Kael had discovered, that single, sour, dissonant note in the alien's perfect symphony of destruction. Kael watched a targeting spire on the colossal alien asteroid flash, and another shard ship appeared a kilometer off his port bow, moving in for a kill. "Anya, now!" he screamed. "Mark!" The universe changed. From the resonators mounted on the hulls of every orphan ship, a wave of pure, focused sound erupted. It was inaudible in the vacuum of space, but its effect was brutally visible. The very fabric of the shard ships wavered, like a reflection in a disturbed pool of water. The coherent light beams they were firing sputtered and died. The obsidian hulls, built on a principle of perfect harmonic resonance, were assaulted by a frequency that was the antithesis of their existence. It was a mathematical poison, a sonic virus. The shard ship in front of Kael didn't explode. It unraveled. Its crystalline structure lost integrity, its flawless geometry collapsing into a chaotic cloud of black dust that was immediately scattered by the solar winds. Across the battlefield, the same scene was repeated. The hunters became the hunted, the orphans, no longer dodging and weaving, press their attack. They became a wolf pack, surrounding their prey, their resonators screaming a song of discordance. A shard ship, its structure flickering, tried to jump away, but its micro-wormhole drive failed, stuttering and collapsing on itself. The ship folded inward, vanishing with a silent implosion. The change in the tide of battle was so sudden, so absolute, that a wild, triumphant cheer erupted across the comms. It was a raw, cathartic sound, the release of days of grief, fear, and impotent rage. They were no longer victims. They were the wrath of gods, wielding a weapon born from their own loss. But their celebration was short-lived. The alien nest, the colossal crystalline asteroid, responded. The rhythmic pulsing of its spires ceased. The low, resonant hum that had vibrated through their hulls fell silent. For a terrifying second, the entire system seemed to hold its breath. Then, the nest began to sing a new song. A low, guttural frequency washed over the fleet, a wave of pure sonic force that had nothing to do with harmonic structures and everything to do with brute power. The cockpits of the orphan skiffs rattled violently, consoles shattered. Kyle felt the vibration in his bones, a nauseating, disorienting thrum that blurred his vision and made his skull feel like it was about to crack open. It was a sonic battering ram, and it was tearing their makeshift ships apart at the seams. Shields are failing hull integrity at 40%. A pilot screamed before his comm cut to static. The Magpie groaned, a deep, metallic protest as a seam along the canopy began to split. Red warning lights flared across Kael's board like a sudden rash. "Anya, it's adapted," Kael yelled, fighting to keep control as the ship bucked like a wild animal. "It's brute forcing us." "I know." Anya's voice was strained, the sound of alarms blaring behind her on the Kerberos bridge. "The counter-frequency is useless now. It's abandoned harmonic resonance for pure kinetic force. It's shaking us to pieces." The alien shard ships, those that had survived the initial counter-assault, stabilized, freed from the harmonic that held them together. They seemed to become cruder, more direct. They stopped firing beams of light and instead began to project localized gravitic distortions, small, intense pockets of gravity that they hurled like cannonballs. One hit the skiff, Iron Heart, not piercing it, but crushing it, the ship crumpling like a discarded can. Their technological superiority was absolute. They had been fighting with a rapier, and when that had been countered, they had simply picked up a sledgehammer. Silas's voice cut through the chaos, cold and steady as bedrock. "This is a losing fight. We can't win a slugging match. We need a new plan." "The plan is the same as it's always been," Kael said, his mind racing, his eyes fixed on the pulsating heart of the alien nest. "We cut off the head. Anya, those spires, they're still the key. They're the source of the broadcast. We can't get close enough." "Kyle," Anya countered, "they'll shake us apart before we're within 100 kilometers. "We don't have to," Kael said. "Oy." An idea, desperate and insane, taking root in his mind. He looked at the holographic display of the Trinary star system, at the violent, chaotic dance of its celestial bodies. He looked at the neutron star day, a pinpoint of impossible density, its gravitational pull a relentless invisible monster. "We're not the only ones who can sing a loud song." He switched to a private channel with Anya and Silas. "Silas, I need a distraction. A big one. Take what's left of the fleet and hit their western flank. Make them think we're trying to break through." Anya, I need you to do something for me. I need you to listen to the rock. Silas didn't question him. He simply said, "For the kids," and his voice was gone, replaced by his fleet-wide command. "All remaining orphans, form on me. We're punching through to the far side of that rock. Full burn, no surrender, no retreat." The 40 or so remaining ships, a battered and bleeding remnant of the proud fleet that had left the Kerberos, responded. They turned as one and charged, a suicidal, glorious assault on the western side of the asteroid, drawing the fire of the remaining shard ships and the full, focused attention of the sonic weapon. The pressure on Kael's ship lessened almost immediately. "What are you thinking, Kael?" Anya's voice was tense. "That neutron star," Kael said, pointing the magpie's nose toward the most dangerous object in the system. "You said the nest is a resonator, powered by the stars. It's built to absorb energy to process it, but everything has a limit. Everything has a note that will break it." He pushed the magpie's engines to the breaking point, flying not at the alien nest, but away from it, skimming the edge of the system's debris disk, heading directly toward the neutron star's accretion disk, a swirling vortex of superheated matter being sucked into the star's inescapable gravity. "The star is pulsing," Kael continued, his eyes scanning the energy readings that were now screaming off the charts. "It's emitting gravitational waves. It's singing its own song. Anya, a song of collapse. I need you to find its keynote, the fundamental frequency of its rotation." On the bridge of the Kerberos, Anya's hands flew across her console. Her mind, a finely tuned instrument of logic and physics, understood his insane plan immediately. The neutron star was a cosmic tuning fork. If they could capture its song and aim it at the alien nest. "I have it," she breathed, her voice filled with a terrible awe. "It's beautiful. A perfect, powerful sine wave. But Kael, to broadcast it with enough power to affect that asteroid, we'd need to turn the Kerberos itself into the amplifier." The implication was clear. To generate that kind of power, they would have to overload their own fusion core. The Kerberos, their home, the last bastion of their people, would become a colossal, one-time use sonic cannon, and the feedback from such a blast would, in all likelihood, cripple it, if not destroy it outright. "Do it," Kael said, his voice quiet. He banked the magpie hard, using the gravity of a passing asteroid to slingshot himself into a new trajectory, a long, looping arc that would bring him back toward the alien nest from above, from the system's chaotic polar region. He was now the aiming point, the targeting laser for the most powerful weapon ever conceived. "Silas," Kael broadcast on the main channel, his voice ringing with a strange calm. "You and your people did good. You bought us the time we needed. Now get clear. Get as far away from that rock as you can." On the western flank, Silas's ships, having been hammered down to less than 30, broke off their suicidal attack, firing their engines and fleeing out system, scattering like startled birds. The alien ships, confused by the sudden retreat, paused for a fatal moment. From the edge of the system, the Kerberos began to glow. On its bridge, alarms shrieked as Anya and her engineering team bypassed every safety protocol, diverting the entire output of the ship's fusion core into the main communications array, turning it into a directional broadcaster. The lights on the bridge flickered and died, plunging them into emergency lighting as the ship shuddered, its ancient frame groaning under a strain it was never meant to endure. "Core is critical," an engineer shouted. "The containment field is about to collapse." "Hold it steady," Anya commanded, her eyes fixed on Kael's position on the holographic chart. Kael, we're locked onto your position. On your mark. Kael brought the magpie screaming in over the north pole of the alien asteroid. Below him, the crystalline spires swiveled, sensing the new threat. But it was too late. He was a herald, a harbinger of a power far older and more violent than their own. He was bringing the song of a dying star to their doorstep. He opened the comms, his voice clear and steady, a final message to the silent, crystalline things that had stolen their future. You came to our home and took our children, he said. The words meant for them, but also for Reese, for Jax, for the crews of the Stonefist and the Grit. You thought we were just noise in the dark. You were wrong. He keyed the trigger signal. We are the song. The song of the neutron star was not a sound. It was a violation, fired from the heart of the overloaded Kerberos, focused through the magpie as a singular, invisible point of annihilation, and aimed at the alien nest. It was a wave of pure, condensed gravity. It was the fundamental note of cosmic collapse, a chord of space-time itself being torn apart and rewritten. The alien asteroid, a marvel of harmonic engineering designed to absorb and process the chaotic energies of a trinary system, was not prepared for this. It was like a perfectly tuned crystal glass being asked to contain the roar of a supernova. The result was instantaneous and absolute. The colossal 50-kilometer structure did not explode. It ceased to exist in a way that defied physics. The crystalline spires, the command nodes, the impossibly complex lattices they didn't shatter. They sublimated. The fundamental frequency of the neutron star, a force of nature given voice and direction, simply unwrote the aliens' perfect and prescient mathematics. The asteroid and the remaining shard ships fused to its surface dissolved into a swirling, incandescent aurora of turquoise and violet light, a silent, beautiful ghost of what had been. The wave of gravitational force, its target now gone, washed outwards. Kael felt it hit the magpie not as a jolt, but as a deep, profound wrongness. The ship's frame twisted, and the universe outside his canopy warped, the stars smearing into streaks of light. His console went dark, every system fried by the gravitational shear. He was adrift, powerless, tumbling through the aftermath of a miracle. The silence that followed was different from the one that had begun their nightmare. It was not the cold, sterile silence of the enemy, but the deep, profound quiet of a finished chapter. On the main comms, there was only the hiss of static. Kael tried his own, his voice a hoarse whisper. Anya Silas, does anyone copy? For a long, terrifying minute, there was no reply. He was alone, a ghost in a dead ship, in a system that had just witnessed the birth of a new god of destruction. Then, a flicker of light on his dead console, a single backup emergency light, powered by a chemical battery, and with it, a crackle in his ear. Ale, Opie, this is Vindicator. It was Silas's voice, broken and laced with static, but it was there. Silas, I'm here. I'm blind and dead in the water, but I'm here. Relief, so powerful it almost made him pass out, washed over him. We see you, kid. Silas's voice came back, a little stronger now. We're coming for you. We got a hell of a light show. Kael looked out at the system. The remaining 30 ships of the Orphan Fleet, battered and broken, were slowly converging on his position. In the distance, where the alien nest had been, the aurora of its demise was slowly fading, leaving nothing behind. It was over. The battle was won. But the war for their souls was just beginning. It took them 3 days to limp the surviving fleet back to the Kerberos. The colony ship was a ghost of itself. The blast had crippled it, its fusion core a molten slag of radioactive metal, its life support running on failing backups. The great hum, the song of their home, was gone. The silence was unnerving. When Kale, rescued by Silas's skiff, finally set foot back in the hangar bay, he was not met as a hero. He was met by the hollow-eyed survivors, their faces etched with the terrible cost of his victory. Anya was there, her face smudged with soot, her arm in a makeshift sling. She had managed to prevent the core from breaching containment, but just barely. They looked at each other, the two architects of the impossible, and there were no words. The victory felt as empty as the silent corridors of their dying home. They had won. They had avenged their dead, but their children were still gone. The hope that had fueled their insane charge, the belief that they would find them inside that crystalline fortress, had died with it. They had found nothing. No holding cells, no cryopods, no sign of life. Just the cold, perfect machinery of a species that treated abduction as a form of resource harvesting. The despair that settled over the survivors was a heavier weight than any star's gravity. They had sacrificed their home, lost more than half their people, and for what? An act of perfect, pointless revenge. Kale retreated into himself. The title of hero felt like a brand of shame. He walked the silent corridors of the Kerberos, the ghosts of the dead whispering in the quiet. He saw Reese at every turn to it, his gravelly laugh echoing in the empty mess hall. He saw Jax, his face flushed with defiance in the forum. He saw the faces of every pilot who hadn't come back. Their victory had turned their home into a tomb, and he, the boy who had told them to make their own light, had led them into an even deeper darkness. It was Anya who pulled him out. She found him in the darkened cockpit of the Magpie, sitting in the pilot's seat, staring out at the hangar. She didn't say anything, just handed him a data slate. On it was a single, complex image. It was a fragment of data she had managed to pull from the alien shard, the one from the nursery in the final seconds before the Kerberos systems had failed. "I thought the shard was just a logbook of their ship movements," she said, her voice quiet. "I was wrong. It's a receiver." It was broadcasting a signal, a homing beacon. Kyle looked at the slate. The image showed a stream of harmonic data, a complex song being transmitted from the shard, and overlaid on it was another signal, faint, chaotic, but undeniably there. It was a biosignature, dozens of them, all human, all children. They weren't in the nest, Anya whispered, a fragile, impossible hope dawning in her eyes. It wasn't their home. It was just an outpost, a processing center. The shard wasn't a logbook for the ship that left. It was a beacon for the next one coming to pick up the cargo. Kyle's heart, a cold, dead stone in his chest for weeks, gave a single, painful thump. He looked at the data, at the faint, flickering light of the biosignatures. They were still alive. "Where?" he asked, his voice cracking. Anya traced a line on the star chart. It led out of the Oort cloud, past the edge of their own solar system, and into the deep, interstellar void, to a destination so far away it was meaningless. "I don't know," she admitted. "The trail is too faint. We can't follow it, not with what we have left." For a moment, the hope flickered and died. They were stranded on a dead ship, their fleet a handful of broken wrecks. They had no way to chase a ghost into the interstellar dark. But as he stared at the map, Kale remembered his own words. "You can't hide from an absence of light. You can only make your own." He looked at Anya, and for the first time since the battle, he saw not an engineer, but a mother whose children, Reese's grandchildren, were among the missing biosignatures. He saw the same fire in her eyes that had burned in his. "They made a mistake," Kael said, his voice regaining its strength. "They left a piece of their technology behind. This shard, it's a receiver, but it's also a resonator. We made it sing one song. We can teach it another." The new plan was even more insane than the last. They couldn't follow the trail, so they would become the destination. They would turn the Kerberos itself into a beacon. They would use the alien shard, their only link to the enemy, and a modified version of the neutron star's frequency to send out a new signal. It wouldn't be a song of destruction. It would be a lie, a signal designed to mimic the homing beacon of another undiscovered nest, a harmonic cry that said the harvest is ready, come and collect. It was a trap, a gamble that their enemies' greed and arrogance would outweigh their caution. They would lure the harvesters to them, on their own terms, to their own chosen ground, the graveyard of their first fleet, the chaotic, violent space of the trinary system. The survivors of the Kerberos went to work. They were no longer fueled by rage, but by a sliver of hope so sharp it was painful. They cannibalized the dead skiffs, using their parts to repair the 30 ships of Silas's fleet. They turned the dead Kerberos into a fortress, a lure at the center of a web. Kyle, Silas, and Anya became the new council, the leaders of a colony that had been forged in fire and loss. The hum of the Kerberos was gone, but a new sound took its place, the sound of saws, of welders, of people working with a singular, desperate purpose. Kale stood on the bridge of the repurposed Kerberos, looking out at the trinary stars. He was no longer a kid, a rock jockey who listened to the songs of asteroids. He was a leader of a people who had stared into the void and had refused to blink. They had no idea if their trap would work. They didn't know if the enemy would come in days, or never. But they would be ready. They had lost their homes, their friends, their families. But they had found something else in the wreckage, an identity. They were the orphans. They were the noise in the dark. They were the song that would not be silenced. And they were waiting.